I just wanted to take a few minutes to record some thoughts. I recently was promoted to the director position of general education at my school, and I'm in charge of general education courses, math, psychology, English, and I've also been working a lot with learning support, which is your basic remedial courses for people who don't test to a certain score. They get enrolled in these courses to help them, make a more natural segue into the college environment. So I've been thinking a lot about teaching methods, and I've been thinking a lot about education in general, and specifically what's wrong with it. And I can only speak from the American perspective because obviously that's the system that I work in, and it's oddly obvious to me what problem we have, and not just in the post-secondary system, but in education throughout the entire country. And that's the fact that we're still operating under this really weird paradigm of education where we expect human beings to be repositories of information as opposed to users of information. We don't expect people to manipulate data. We don't expect people to do anything realistic or functional. We just want them to absorb it and retain it. And this is something that's been happening since the 60s. I mean, ever since Bloom's taxonomy came up, there are different levels of knowledge and there's different levels of learning. And you don't just stay at the knowledge level. You don't just stay at a point where you fill in bubbles on a standardized test, meaning that you understand the definition of a word or you can recall a bit of data. Real learning is when you take that information and you do something with it. Either you turn it into an argument, or you participate in a conversation, or you evaluate a position, or, anything better than simply saying this is that. And the scary thing is that all we do in assessment is stay at the shallowest level of the pool. It's like we're trying to teach people to swim, but we never let them get above 3 feet of water. This makes for students who are not only unprepared for the world that they're segueing into, in my opinion, my humble opinion, we're actually hurting students. We're actually doing active damage to students. We're turning them into people who are not just capable of using data, but in fact their use of data and their use of concepts is impaired. They do it in an imperfect way. Let me give you an example. A long time ago, it's not long enough that it could be even remotely comforting, I was teaching an English course, and I had students telling me, well, I put a comma there because someone told me that I put a comma where I pause. No, that's not how commas work. That's a world of chaos and destruction. It's a world without rules. It's a world where William Shatner can just throw out commas everywhere, and they're okay because he pauses everywhere. God, who told you that? That's knowledge that is actually hindering you. It's hurting you. It's making you less functional. And again, the more I run into this stuff, the more I tell people, if you're a bad teacher, you're not just doing a disservice to your students. You're hurting everyone because you have people going out there and doing damage to themselves and doing damage to the system. And from my perspective, the solution is not difficult. And it's not even, not obvious. It's staring you in the face. You design a classroom and you design curriculum that's based on getting your students to do something, to create a project, to write something and revise that document, to use mathematics in a way that they can actually build something or argue something, to actually bring logic and higher level thinking into your class, as opposed to A, B, D. That's not how the real world works. The real world is not a standardized test. And in fact, you're creating destructive little bombs that are going out there and screwing things up. And we have no one to blame for this but ourselves. Because we've got this really weird idea that data, don't get me wrong, data is important. Assessment is important. We need to know if our students are succeeding. But our understanding of assessment and our gathering of data is like, it's like how a 3-year-old tries to gather data. It's just numbers. It's just raw, unadulterated numbers. There absolutely is no depth to assessment. And it's shocking to me that this is still an issue. And again, not just at the post-secondary level, but this almost seems to be like a legislative issue. And it's so easy to blame the No Child Left Behind Act because it puts so much emphasis on standardized testing. But you could also probably blame the people who make standardized testing, which they don't really have an incentive to create a test that actually shows you what students do. Because no one knows what good assessment is supposed to look like. So if you have an assessment, if you have a curriculum that's pretty, somebody's going to buy it. And it's probably going to be a state or a governor or a country. And we're just not asking the questions that matter. We're too busy going through the motions. And it's funny, I think the biggest problem is when it comes to education, nobody respects teachers. And I actually understand, because a bad teacher is a supervillain. They're really awful. They are lowest of the low. But when you have a good teacher, and when you have somebody who actually understands how nuanced and cool it is to teach something well, and to actually be able to say, here's what my students can do. Let me show you the things that my students can do. Look at this project they made, that they demonstrated angles and they demonstrated engineering. Let me show you this magazine my students created that participates in a political dialogue. Let me show you this theoretical patient in a psychology class, in a psychology project, and let me show you how the other groups diagnosed that patient. Really good instruction, really good teaching actually is impressive when it's done correctly. And students, when it's done right, students can't help but actually engage in it because it's designed to, fire the mechanisms in their brain. It can be done. You just have to quit being stupid. And you have to quit being shallow. And you have to quit holding on to this conception that, oh, it's not me, it's my idiot students. No, it's you. You're the absolute awful thing that needs to be just beaten up. You are the thing that needs to be gotten rid of. Because when your students are too busy feeding their virtual cows to listen to what you're saying, that's not their fault. They're trying to tell you, you're boring and we don't care.